concerning because that same day, January 12, 2017, that's also the day that David Ignatius writes his piece on this issue. So, was there any connection there? Is that just coincidence? We don't know. The other thing that's a concern is 29 people between the election day and inauguration day, during the transition time between the two administrations, 29 people are unmasking names of U.S. citizens. In an intelligence product, you're supposed to redact the names of American citizens, but 29 people were wanting to unmask this and find out information about General Flynn. That's scary, and it's scary who they are. You got the president's chief of staff, the president's vice president. You got people as close to President Obama as there can possibly be among that list of 29 people, and a host of others in that list of 29 people. Very concerning, and we should have a chance to talk to these people and ask them, why in the heck were you doing this, particularly in this time frame?
Well, that's just the questions, Congressman. Why did these people want to know? And such a large number of people want to know. Is there any inclination into why they needed to know this? Have you heard any?
Well, I mean, they're going to give their answers. We were so concerned about. Yeah, they're going to give their sort of pat answer. What intrigues me the most is some key dates in January, and specifically Jim Comey. Because remember, Jim Comey is the common denominator throughout of this. He was the guy who was in charge of the FBI during the Clinton investigation, in charge of the FBI when they started the Trump-Russia investigation, stayed on to the new administration. So Jim Comey, think about this. On January 4th, Comey tells Peter Strzok, go tell the agents who think there is nothing wrong with what Michael Flynn did, that he's fine, that they should drop the case. Go tell them we don't want them to drop the case. The next day, this January 5th meeting, Comey's in the White House with President Obama. President Obama brings up General Flynn. January 6th, Comey then travels to Trump Tower in New York to brief then President-elect Trump and talk to him about the dossier. Stays after the meeting to brief the president on the dossier. The dossier Jim Comey already knew was false. He already knew it was Russian disinformation. He knew it was paid for by the Clinton campaign, but yet he's going to brief the president-elect on the dossier. Then that information then gets leaked. The press writes about it, and of course, 12 days later, Jim Comey sneaks a couple agents into the FBI, doesn't notify the White House counsel like he's supposed to, doesn't talk to Sean at the White House or anyone else at the White House, sneaks them in to trap and set up General Flynn. Jim Comey is the common denominator. He's the central player. I hope we get a chance to talk to him again. I know he's been appeared before Congress number of times, but I hope we get a chance to talk to him again.
I think it's fascinating the pattern that you're bringing up, right? So Biden unmasks Flynn's name from these documents on January 12th. The Ignatius column comes out that day. Comey briefs everybody on the transition team, including myself, on January 5th. BuzzFeed has it later that night, and so does CNN. There's a pattern of this. But let me show you another thing that I think from a pattern standpoint is really interesting.
And and Sean.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, Sean, and that's the problem. If you're unmasking names and then leaking that information to the press, that is a crime. That is the problem. You're exactly right, Sean.
But let me ask you this. Here's another pattern. Last week, President Obama had a call with a bunch of his alumni, his former staffers. And on the call, he says this, and the fact that there is no precedent that anybody can find someone who has been charged with perjury just getting off scot-free. Well, wait a second. What perjury are we talking about? Because that wasn't one of the issues in front of Comey until the new judge gets appointed. And what does the new judge say just now? He says, I'm going to ask this retired judge, Sullivan. He says, I'm going to ask the retired judge to come in and investigate whether we should charge Flynn now with perjury. So suddenly it gets said last week, now the judge in the case is suddenly bringing up perjury. Do you think there's any connection between Obama tipping his hand last week on this call and the charges suddenly coming up?
Boy, I hope not. That would be so, I hope not, because that is just not how this country is supposed to operate. We're the greatest nation ever. It's about the rule of law. Obama criticizes, it says there's been God bless Bill Barr, the Attorney General, and the great work he's been doing. We don't learn this information but for his efforts, but for the efforts of Rick Grinnell, but for the efforts of Sidney Powell, Mike Flynn's lawyer. We don't learn this information. So God bless them. And I hope that's not the case. This case should be dropped. The prosecution doesn't want to prosecute. They said there's nothing there. There was no predicate for this. It should be dropped. I don't know what the judge is doing, but let's hope that's not the case.
Well, Congressman, I appreciate you being with us because you're raising some serious questions. And I know you're right. All of these other people in government are doing a phenomenal job of getting the truth out and this transparency. But you in Congress are doing a great job of making sure that these people's feet are held to the fire. So thank you for all of your efforts in joining us today to help bring it down.
Thank you.
We say, and I ask you to say with us, lift up your voices in this great meeting in the heart of England. And to all the world. marches on.